computer use may be the most remarkable change in the way that we can get business value out of AI in the course of the last, say, 3 months or so. It's the thing that makes things like, ChatGPT work or, Claude Co work really, really valuable, because the computer can actually take over a desktop and just use software and be able to do real jobs. And this comes from an insight that most of what we do on the computer is really simple, right? You move a mouse to a given location. You click, you drag, you type on the keyboard. Only so many keys, and then with modifiers, whatever, and you can type to be able to express yourself. Probably the most complicated thing is being able to understand what's on the screen, because there's a lot of complicated information on there. But that's where the models have gotten really good, because the models are what we call multimodal. They're able to understand pictures as well as text. And modern models can understand really high-resolution pictures and get a lot of information out of them. And that opens us up, right, for the computer to be able to understand how it is that a given piece of software works, right, what it's looking at on the screen, combine that with its ability to make a plan, with having read the documentation. It gets a context that goes from just like this immediate task to what the job is to be done. And that unlocks all sorts of possibilities for us to get a lot of economic value. So if the computer's secret is that computer work tends to be relatively simple, the secret of a lot of work is that most of it's waiting. We all have this experience all the time, right? We are waiting. We punch something in, we're waiting. You click on something on YouTube and you're waiting for the video to come up. You are going to, the website or the resource that you need in order to be able to do your job, and you're waiting for this legacy system to pop up or whatever. You're doing infrastructure work because you're in IT and you're manipulating Azure or your local network or whatever, and you're waiting basically for operations to complete. You're doing video editing work, like what's about to happen for this process I'm doing to make this video right here. And we're waiting for all these large files to be transcoded and recoded and edited and nibbed and tucked and uploaded and downloaded and then uploaded again. And all these things require just waiting. Because there's so much waiting going on, that requires us to be sort of babysitting the process without really adding value to it. We add value to it when the waiting is over, but while the waiting is happening, we could be putting our attention to something else, but usually the process isn't so long that we can reasonably go and switch focus very deeply, right? So it sort of keeps interrupting and filling our day. That slow work is what AI can handle for us extremely well, because there's one thing AI knows how to do and does cheaply, it's wait. So let's take this video that we're making right now. I am right now recording, on roll using OBS, and the computer is listening to me, and it's recording the roll, the audio, the video, the whatever, right? And I am doing this, probably even doing a couple of takes, whatever. But then the video needs to be transcoded, from the MKV file into an MP4 file. It needs to be uploaded to whatever we're using for video editing. I use something called Descript. It then needs to get in Descript and needs to be transcribed, because Descript does most of its work through the transcript. That's the way you edit things in Descript. So it needs to be transcribed. And then you need to actually do the manipulations of it, doing the cuts and whatever, getting just the takes that you were looking for. You need to add, other cards and content. You need maybe making B-roll or collecting it, out of stock photos, or, making it out of, AI generated, animations or whatever to help explain things. And then once you've got all that together, you need to download it and then upload it to the likes of YouTube, from where you can do some more preparation in order to get it out the door. These are a lot of processes, but more importantly, there's a lot of times between these processes. Right? If all you had to do was that work, you could probably get done like an hour or so. But because you have to do a lot more than that, because you have to wait for each of these things to recalculate as you finish the work, And because we're talking about video here, it's a little squicky. Sometimes you got to refresh the page or refresh the application or whatever. It takes more time. It takes multiple hours. And those hours are being sucked up in those waiting windows that we talked about before. And so what we're doing for this series here is we're having the AI take care of those sets of processes where it's waiting, right? So after I cut this recording here, it's going to upload it to Descript and take care of that transcoding, take care of that uploading, take care of waiting for that transcribing. It's going to go through all of those steps and manage those, not just waiting for them to finish, but taking care of whatever the work is that needs to happen in the middle. And that is wonderful, because then it will set things up that I can just have something to review, and I can then do that reviewing, like however many hours later, and then it can work again for some number of hours, come back with something else to review. And if I have to do these sets again, I'll do that. But my intervention is at a time of my choosing, which is, and I'm looking at something I can actually react to. I can give it as much feedback as I want. And it's going to take me about as much time as it takes for me to watch the video plus another, 5 or 6 minutes to give feedback. And then I get to walk out of the room. It's like being an executive, who's coming to the meeting, getting the brief, able to give the feedback that's most useful, and then walk away because it's now time to go to the next thing. I don't have to babysit the rest of it. The fact that this whole thing takes hours is the computer's time, not my time, and that makes it much more affordable for me to be able to do these kinds of projects and be able to share these kinds of insights. So I look at computer use as a remarkable opportunity for our work to be more human. And what I mean by that is we're not spending our time waiting. We're not spending our time doing the small mechanical things, right? Things that can be automated get automated away. But the part that can't be automated, we get to really focus our time on. Right? So what am I spending my time doing? With this video here, I'm spending my time on asking about ideas for the video and coming up with ideas for, say, the thumbnail, for the topic, for how it is we're going to be able to explain this idea about like the value of letting the computer wait for you. I'm going to spend my time, working on the recording, right? Based on a series of riffs that the AI has generated for me. I can talk more about the process in another video. But essentially, I just sit here and record these takes, with the camera on for, like 20 or 30 minutes. And then it runs off and does things. And then I can do the review, which will be watching like a 10-minute video with some additional feedback window afterwards, which I'll probably just dictate to it. And then another session after that, probably of like when it comes back. And then, if at that point it's sort of, I think it's ready enough, it can go up to YouTube and get processed. And I'm providing the review that goes at the end, the taste that says, this is the type of thing I want to associate, I want to get out into the world because I think it's an idea worth sharing. That means, from my point of view, that this is far more human than really if I had been producing the whole thing myself, because I would have spent a lot more of my time, a lot bigger percentage of working on the video, on like the mechanical parts, right? And trying to figure out what can I minimize. And what I wind up minimizing is stuff like this, being able to do more takes, being able to talk about the ideas a little bit better, because I'm spending my time figuring out how to just sort of get the tech to work. Let the AI do that. And then I get to spend my time on the part that's much more human and far less mechanical. I think there's a lot to be said for that. So let's talk about the economics, right, of dead time, the economics of waiting. When I am waiting myself, I have an opportunity cost because I'm spending my time waiting. I'm not spending my time thinking, reading, learning, working with customers, whatever. That would be driving more value, right, for my practice. I'm not spending time. My children would be improving time, which would be improving the value for my family. I am waiting, right? So waiting always has a cost for me. Whenever I hire someone, if a lot of their job involves waiting, and by the way, if you hire a professional video editor, you're hiring them significantly to wait on your behalf. All that waiting time is billable, right? Because it's time they can't spend doing something else. So they're blocked, right? Waiting for humans is expensive. The amazing thing is waiting for machines is really cheap, because it's not like we're asking it to be, doing work every single microsecond, right? We're saying, hey, you're going to go and get this thing from point A to point B, and then you're shepherding that process. And what does shepherding the process mean? What would it mean for us? It would probably mean like we're watching to make sure the machine doesn't crash, or that the window is still there as it goes through its half-hour or 45-minute process or whatever. Well, the AI can do that. And the AI doesn't need to do that every second. The AI can be doing that every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes. Now consider, if you had a process that was going to take like 45 minutes, and let's say it's going to monitor it every like 5 minutes, that means it's going to take, 9 or 10 sessions, right, where it's checking to see what's going on to confirm whether or not it's still okay and whether there's anything to change. That's 10 requests. That's nothing from a cost point of view. It's certainly nothing compared to a lot of the agentic work that we otherwise do around here, right? So that check is cheap because it involves all of that waiting. So that means that for the AI, waiting is really inexpensive, right? It drives down the cost of of the tokens that you would otherwise pay for, because there's so much time that can go in between each time it asks the question. You can have a process that takes many, many hours. I'm actually doing one on the computer that's adjacent to me, and it will take it can take a lot of time that's elapsed, but the amount of AI time it takes, the amount of AI cost it takes, is very, very low, because we're only asking this relatively simple question, right, on this relatively long interval from its point of view. And that means that we get to put time to our advantage. So a thing that's expensive for us is cheap for it. There's this cool thing where the essence of all strategy is to put strength against weakness. And, this is an area where AI is strong because it is basically free to wait and is super cheap to be doing something on that more infrequent basis. And it is expensive for a human being, right? So human beings are weak at waiting because it's expensive for us because it blocks us up, and it's cheap for the AI. Man, that means there's a lot of strategic leverage to it. And that is something I love to find in business, is opportunities to put that strength against weakness. So I probably don't need to tell you there are a bunch of situations where we need to wait for things, right? You've probably done that multiple times today. But there's significant waiting sources in doing infrastructure work, in waiting for other media to work for us, interacting with legacy systems, frankly, interacting with a lot of non-legacy systems that aren't exactly perfectly optimized, iterating through a whole bunch of pages that we need to go download stuff from, and how long those things take to load. And it's like a couple hours later that we're done. Because it took us that long to click? No, because it took that long for the pages to load. It's the waiting time that kills us. So the opportunity for us is to use the same technology where, the AI can be, pushing the buttons, if you will, and can be intelligently pushing the buttons, right? It's not like using old school, UiPath robotic process automation. It is, sort of this new way of approaching it because it can apply our judgment, where our judgment can include things like, is the site still up? Is it still loading? Is it, in a proper state? Is there something I need to click first? Right? All of these things AI can see because it's basically just taking the picture of the screen and interpreting it. Because it can see those things, it can make smarter decisions that get around all those edge cases that otherwise trip up, the kinds of, RPA type solutions that we might have had 10 or 15 years ago. And this really is novel to the last 100 days. And I would really encourage you to give it a try. So I've done a lot of mobile development work too, and that work really slowed down when it came to deploying things. And I remember this tool that was really popular in mobile development called Fastlane. And it's a remarkable piece of technology. And its key claim to fame was that the process for, sending an app to the App Store was really kind of painful and you could make a mistake and would have to go back again. But more importantly, you just kept on waiting between, all right, I want to go ship this, and taking care of your archive and getting it up into the App Store and being able to go check the button to make sure it's been processed, and then being able to get over to test flight and blah, 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 right? There's a lot of these manual steps that need to be taken, particularly at the time. It would just wait between the steps. And so my joke was I just called it lane because it wasn't fast. If you knew what you were doing working with, mobile development, you could probably beat Fastlane almost every time in a race of who would get the thing up into the App Store faster. But Fastlane would win the who could get it done more cheaply because it wouldn't require a human babysitting the process for the couple of hours necessary to go get it from point A to point B, because it was able to automate more of that process and basically wait on the user's behalf, right? So something that might have taken 2 hours, it takes 3 hours, but those 3 hours are not your 3 hours, and that was a real benefit. And that's really why Lane was the story of its value, right? Because it wasn't about it going faster. It was about that you could take this work, put it in a separate lane, and now no longer blocks you, and you can go do other things and then be notified, ding, like by an email or a text or whatever, after the process was completed some hours later, right? So you go from being the person who is babysitting it, who are shepherding it, to the person who's being notified when it finally works or if the wheels come off the wagon. Both of those are fine because that gives you something that's reasonable for you to do. So when I think about like how computer use can drive value, I think about Fastlane. I think about the important part not being that it's faster, but that has created a separate lane of work that means it's no longer my problem. And in this case is enabling things that I might have otherwise concluded were just like too expensive to do and now become much closer to free because all of the hard work that was like the cost for me gets to be, taken care of by the machine, and I get to do the part that I really care about, which is, like sharing these ideas with you. So if you're wondering what you should use computer use for, I might ask, what do I need to babysit? Right? What am I babysitting today? What is me just sort of staring at the computer, tapping, waiting for it to do things? Some of that might even be AI stuff itself. But I think we all have these experiences. And those are the things that I might first ask, hey, Cloud Code, hey, ChatGPT, hey, whatever you want to use, can you take care of this for me? Can you watch this and see when it comes back? And it's really cool too, because if you have it pay attention to what you're doing, and I think ChatGPT has recently introduced a feature that makes it easy to record what you're doing as you're doing it, so it knows kind of what to watch for, right? That previous thing of like is sort of putting together its documentation, its visual documentation of how something is supposed to work, and then it's in a position to start watching for how to do it next time. By showing it, you'll say, here's what I want to do, and here's where things go. In fact, I don't even have to show it all that much. I can say, look, what I want to accomplish is this, and here's the app. You can go take a look at the app, Mr. ChatGPT, and now you can figure out like where on that screen you think you probably need to push the buttons, and then you can learn how to do this. It's a little bit like training a junior engineer and then asking them, or junior associate of any kind, and then asking them to start to do the work based on having watched you do it. In medical school, there's an expression, which is see one, do one, teach one. And that's kind of the approach I take with the AI, right? That's watch me do things, have it do things itself and try it, and then write it down. So it's teaching other AIs in the future how it's going to be done. And that's also what gives me more leverage on a going forward basis. And hopefully that'll mean that these videos get better as I move along. But ask yourself, what do you babysit? What are you waiting for? Because the odds that AI can be able to help out with that in particular could be the highest leverage thing you do this week. Quick ask. If you have found value in what you are learning about here today and in these videos that I'm doing, please click the like. And if you want to be kept informed more, click the subscribe. It helps YouTube know that this stuff is, in fact, worth sharing. And I'd be really grateful if you were to share it too. And I would love to be able to help more people. And if it has helped you, please, put a comment in. Let me know, what you're doing with computer use. And if you got more questions about it, and we'll keep the conversation going.